This is our 5th time.
I wouldn't have dreamt of what I learned here.
This encourages you and inspires you, and it's so relaxing, and the food is great.
I love Retreat at Sea, and I will do it again.
And you should be here.
Holy Trinity is at work full time here.
Yet another prelate is exercising his right to politely and respectfully tell Rome he won't bless couples living in sin. Join us with the latest from the Eternal City, Church Militant's Rome correspondent, Dr. Jules Gomes. Jules, who is this latest bishop to tell Rome he will bless any individual who asks for a blessing but won't bless an adulterous or same-sex couple as a couple?
Brad, what is very interesting about this prelate is that he comes from a very liberal part of the world, Latin America, where most priests and most bishops, thanks to liberation theology, are gung-ho when it comes to anything that is progressive coming out of the Vatican. But we have the Bishop of Moyobamba, you can see him in the picture, which is a diocese in Peru, breaking ranks with his fellow prelates. And Rafael Escudero Lopez Brea is very clearly telling his clergy that they are prohibited from carrying out what the Vatican Declaration Fiducia Supplicans allows them to do, which is blessing same-sex couples.
Now, Jules, he's actually he is making a distinction, though, correct? I mean, he's saying that, you know, you can bless any sinner who asks for a blessing, but just not a sinful couple. Is that right?
Well, absolutely, Brad. In his statement, which he put out yesterday, is very articulate. Let me read what he actually says. He says, the church blesses sinners, but never their sin or their sinful relationship. Our pastoral charity towards those in sinful situations obliges us to call them to conversion. So he goes on to say, Brad, that, well, if, a couple wants to come up for prayer and seek conversion, seek to stop living in sin, then, most willingly, we will bless that decision and we will bless those individuals. But then the bishop goes on to say, he says, dear priests and lay faithful, let us not minimize the destructive and short-sighted consequences resulting from this effort by some church hierarchs to legitimate such blessings, in some cases with good intentions, and in others, as not a few have been manifesting with the intention of destroying the sacred deposit of the church's tradition. Very, very clear.
I would say that if I was a young priest or whatever, I would think that the reading that he's giving it is correct. I mean, fiducia supplicans, if you're saying that some couple is coming forward and they're saying we're trying to live God's grace, is trying to live according to the gospel or whatever, please bless us. Well, you'd bless them individually, just so you're not giving them the influence or the idea that they're somehow being blessed in their relationship, but blessed as persons seeking to live a chaste lifestyle. So he sounds like he really wants to truly save souls, but what's he saying about upholding the deposit of faith and about preserving union with Rome? Because a lot of these guys are being accused that somehow they're being not in union with Rome over all this.
Brad, I'm so glad you used the phrase, he wants to save souls. Because when I was covering the very liberal left-wing Amazon Synod, colloquially, which came to be known as the Pachamama Synod in 2019, this bishop, again, Bishop Lopez Brea, differed with his fellow liberal bishops, and he said that the church should not abandon its primary mission, which is not enculturating restoration or, some sort of socialistic redistribution of wealth. But he said that the primary goal of the church is to evangelize the lost, because Jesus is the only way to salvation, and without Jesus we are lost. So, that was very, very powerful. But now he goes on to say, he says this, on the day of my episcopal ordination, I solemnly swore, he quotes the text, to preserve the deposit of faith in purity and integrity in accordance with the tradition always and everywhere observed in the church since the time of the apostles, close quote. Therefore, I admonish the priests of the prelature of Moyobamba not to perform any form of blessing of couples in an irregular situation or of couples of the same sex.
Okay, so Jules, what about preserving unity with Rome itself? Is he talking about that, urging that?
Well, he is, obviously not suggesting any form of schism, and none of the bishops or bishops' conferences who have dissented from this document, Brad, have suggested schism with Rome. They simply say that, either this document is seriously flawed, or it's ambiguously worded, or we simply cannot adapt it to local circumstances, particularly since the faith of our people, the time immemorially preserved faith of our people and our culture will not permit this.
So what's the current Episcopal map looking like, Jules? I mean, we've been reporting on several dioceses, entire conferences of bishops, individual bishops across the world. What are the dioceses who are outright banning the practice of blessing irregular or same-sex couples as couples? And which are the ones that are kind of on the fence with that? And which ones are all in the tank for blessing couples? The more the merrier. Come on, one can come all.
Right, that's a very good question. So far, give or take a few, we have a categorical no, including a ban on clergy blessing same-sex couples or couples living in sin. Most of these bishops and bishops' conferences come from Africa. So we have Angola and Sao Tome, Burkina Faso, Niger. We have Cameroon, Ghana. Then we have individual dioceses, as I said, despite the Latin America being very liberal, there are nevertheless, or South America, dioceses like Formosa, in Brazil, where the bishop has again told his clergy, no way we're going to bless same-sex couples. And then you have, Eastern European countries like Hungary, you have Kazakhstan, coming back to Africa, you have Kenya, the Diocese of Nairobi in particular, very strong ban on carrying out same-sex blessings, Wote in Kenya and other dioceses, and then you have the entire Bishops' Conference of Malawi, one of the strongest statements against it. You have bishops of Poland rejecting it, Rwanda and Zambia. Ukraine has been diplomatic. We're talking about the Greek Catholic Church, and they've kind of sat on the fence by saying, we are an Eastern Rite Catholic Church under a different canon law. We are sui juris, and so our priests don't really need to follow this document. But again, interestingly, you've got none of the other major Eastern Rite churches, the Melkites, the Maronites, the Syro-Malabar, the Syro-Malankara, and both the Syro-Malabar and Malankara took a very strong position against same-sex blessings or homosexual relationships, but they have been silent at this point. And then, of course, you have dioceses or countries or bishops' conferences who are quite enthusiastic about this. We talked yesterday about Cardinal Oswald Gracias from Bombay, one of Pope Francis's 9 consultors, who basically said that, well, it fits in perfectly with Indian, by which he meant Hindu spirituality, where, you can bless a cow or a stone or a snake, and all that is fine. And then those bishops who are really gung-ho are, of course, those who have already been promoting same-sex blessings, like Austria, Belgium, Germany, of course, but then you also have Croatia, who has spoken positively about this. Switzerland, very, very enthusiastic about it, despite the Bishop Marian Eleganti, the Bishop Emeritus of Chur, who's a conservative. And from the United States, even though countries like the United States, Great Britain, and Australia, the entire confraternity of Catholic priests in these three countries have issued statements saying that they will not, acquiesce and perform same-sex blessing. And we're talking about thousands of priests here, Brad. The bishops there in these places seem to be quite liberal. So you have Supich, Bishop of Chicago, I think, Cardinal Supich, who is very, very enthusiastic about this document.
Yeah, so it's kind of a hit and miss across the country. Some dioceses over here in the United States are saying that we're not trying to regularize marriage and this and that, but they're still kind of riding the fence with regard to couples coming up. So it's kind of a patchwork out there. I would like to say the bishop from Peru, he finishes his letter urging priests and faithful, quote, to cultivate filial union with the present pontiff. And that leads into this next question, Jules. Some Catholics, not a few Catholics, are looking askance at all these bishops who are balking at implementing this latest declaration on blessing couples living in sin, whether same-sex or regular unions. And because the declaration was issued, it's from Cardinal Fernández, they say, the head of the prestigious dicastery for the doctrine of the faith, personally signed by Pope Francis. So they believe that you have to be in lockstep with this. And if you're not, then somehow you're not Catholic or not Catholic enough. But how does Fernández, who issued the declaration, got the Pope's signature for it, how does he see it? Does he think it's okay for these bishops and conferences and all that to say no to Rome over this issue?
Brad, I've been speaking to many people here on the ground, including priests at the Vatican, priests in different pontifical universities. And believe me, many of them, including clergy who belong to significantly liberal communities like the Jesuits, are shell-shocked. But what is even more, upsetting, and this has really been an earthquake under Fernández's feet, is the fact that major portions of at least Africa, those beloved peripheries that Pope Francis is so fond of exalting, have basically thrown this document back in the face of Pope Francis and Cardinal Victor Manuel Fernández, saying that, we will not implement this. Now, Fernández was interviewed at the end of December by a Spanish media company, and he was asked what he thinks about it, and he was really trying to, respond to this coherently, because this is hugely damaging to his own reputation and to the credibility of the Roman magisterium. And so he said, okay, well, if there are countries where bishops decide not to implement it because of their own cultural dispositions, that's fine. They can choose to reject this document, which is very strange for, someone who is supposed to enforce papal magisterium, particularly when it comes to doctrine and practice. So he talked about Africa, and he said that in parts of Africa, many countries in Africa, there are laws which prohibit and criminalize same-sex behavior. We have reported extensively on this, Brad, on our Rome dispatches. And we've talked about how, again, these African bishops have broken ranks with Pope Francis, who has called the criminalization of homosexual behavior a sin and an offense and an injustice against God. But now Fernández is saying, okay, fine, if your country prohibits by law and criminalizes homosexual relationships, it's fine if you don't go along with the Roman magisterium, but you decide not to implement this document, and you tell your priests, well, don't do that.
No, well, Jules, this gets right to the heart of the whole matter here. You've been predicting this individualized, nationalized approach that each diocese would have on such matters for quite a while. Instead of being the touchstone of unity, Rome would in effect be a source, an actual green light of this type of disunity. It's really odd that bishops are all telling Rome no, and Fernández has given a thumbs up to that, saying that's okay. Can you elaborate on what you've been seeing for quite a while and where this is headed?
Well, Brad, part of the reason I'm able to make this prediction, and I could be wrong because I'm not infallible, is because I've seen what has happened in the Anglican Communion. Also, I've been watching trends on the ground in Africa and Latin America. In Africa, the one reason why or two reasons why the bishops are so strongly opposed to this document, we're leaving aside the obvious issue of their own cultural backgrounds, but because, firstly, Islam is very strong in these countries, many of these countries, and homosexual practice is utterly abhorrent to Muslims. And the Muslims are just going to, mock the Christians, if not persecute them, if they start adopting such a practice. But secondly, the Pentecostals and evangelicals are very strong in Africa. And the moment such documents are issued, they immediately begin to tell their countrymen, the Catholic Church is not reliable. It's changed its teaching. Come to us. So there's going to be a heck of a lot of sheep stealing, and there's going to be a massive exodus from the Roman Catholic Church, as we are already seeing. Ghana, there's been a massive exodus to Pentecostal and evangelical churches, which is one reason these bishops are speaking up so strongly. But what I've been predicting is the balkanization of the Roman Catholic Church. And by balkanization, I mean the splitting into African churches and Asian churches and European churches, and the permission being given by the Vatican for them to do practice and doctrine based on their culture. So if Africans think that, celibacy for priests is a bad idea, polygamy is a good idea, but homosexual practice is terrible, it's okay, culturally speaking, if they adopted theologically. However, when we come to Europe, we see the context is very different, and polygamy is frowned upon, but same-sex behavior is to be welcomed. If not, we are turning people away. Women's ordination is to be welcomed. If not, we are rejecting people. And so we will have these practices accepted in Europe. And this has already fractured the Anglican Communion, and this, sadly, is the way Rome seems to be going.
You wonder if that phrase attributed to Francis back in around 2016, I may go down as the Pope who divided the Church, is actually going to come to pass. For the past 2,000 years, the papacy has been not only a source of unity within the Catholic Church, but also a unifying force. So odd that now a declaration on blessings of all things, issued by the DDF and signed by the Pope himself, gets such pushback from so many bishops around the world, and the DDF comes out and gives that discord a seemingly thumbs up. Makes you wonder about the predictions in 1973 from the church-approved apparition of Our Lady of Akita, saying there'd come a day when it would be bishop against bishop and cardinal against cardinal. Seems like that day is coming. Jules, thank you so much for gathering all this up for us and laying it out so clearly.
Thank you, Brad.
Thanks again for watching today's episode of Rome Dispatch. This show is brought to you by donors like Real Estate for Life. If you're looking to buy or sell a home and want to support our mission, visit realestateforlife.org. Again, that's realestateforlife.org. Be sure to tell them Church Militant sent you. God bless.